I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robinson, and I'm actually very excited about this topic today because a lot of us, especially here in the West, we don't fully understand the relationship simply between economics and our daily lives. And I got to tell you, when I was in school, in the university, we went to Berlin, and it was just a few days before they took out Checkpoint Charlie. I actually have pieces of both. The Berlin Wall was actually two walls, for those of you who don't know, east and west, and I have pieces of both that I personally knocked out with a hammer. And the striking thing about that trip was when you went from West Germany into East Germany, and for me, it felt like I was like going in from like a modern, color movie to a black and white movie. Because it was completely different on the other side of the wall. Well, what was the difference, and how does that impact us today? We're going to talk about that. My guest is Rainer Zitelmann. He is he's a lot of things. He's a businessman. He's an academic. He's a writer, a film producer. He's someone, though, that understands the relationship between the economic systems, ideologies, and poverty and wealth. In fact, he has a book out now called The Origins of Poverty and Wealth. And if you're thinking, I thought this was a Christian show, well, you check the Bible. It talks a lot about wealth, money, as well as poverty. So I think this will be very educational. I know it will be for me. So join me in this education. Rainer Zitelmann, welcome to Life Today Live. Great to have you today.
Thank you.
So you are in Berlin right now, the city that I referenced. How are things in Berlin now, all these years later? I have not been back. I would love to go back, but I haven't been back.
So the first thing that you will see, that if you go now from what was West Berlin to East Berlin, that you don't see this difference that you have seen. On the opposite, in some ways it's more modern in East Berlin because there were now in the last decades new buildings and modernization. So in a way, even it's not in all parts, but in parts it's even more modern now in East Berlin than in West Berlin. So it changed a lot. And you also mentioned something when we talked before that you was in Poland, and that the air was very bad.
It was.
This was also in East Germany. They had a lot of environmental problems. And for example, CO2 emissions were 3 times higher than in West Germany, or sulfur dioxide was even 10 times higher in East Germany than in West Germany. So it was really terrible. And, this is, if some anti-capitalists tell us we should abolish capitalism because of climate change or environmental problems. No. It was much worse in socialism than it is in capitalism. And if you would go to Poland now, you would see it's great. It's amazing what you see in Warsaw. I have a book. I read a book now. It's the title is Europe's Growth Champion, and this is about Poland. And I have also 2 films about it. I mentioned it. The film about Berlin is Life Behind Berlin Wall. You can Google it and find it on YouTube. And the film about Poland, it's both in English. It's Poland from Socialism to Prosperity. And what a lot of people don't know, Poland was in the 80s one of the poorest countries in Europe, poorer than Ukraine, for example, much poorer. And they had very high inflation rate, some 100%, and a lot of debt. And people were really, really very poor. But today it's amazing there. And this was because of free market reforms that they had there. And this is, my book is about a lot of stories like this because I traveled in 2022 and 2023 I traveled to 30 countries all over the world, and I spoke with people and I made my research and to find out a little bit about poverty and wealth, and what makes countries rich and what makes countries poor.
You know, the other place where the air is bad is Beijing. I've been there, and it was noticeably bad there as well. So it's interesting that there's a pattern here. But so the thing about Berlin, and I know you were there during this time, is that you had one city divided in two. One of them was communist, another one was capitalist. Is that really? Am I oversimplifying to say that wealth is directly related to the economic system and that capitalism is better?
Absolutely. You see, I think Germany is a good example because it was divided in these two parts, and the same people, the same history, the same culture, the same language. So the only thing that was different is the economic system. And we had it before in our pre-conversation. Maybe I can repeat it. There are some facts. For example, in East Germany, if you ordered a car, you had to wait at least 12 years, from 12 to 17 years to get your car. And it was not a great car like in West Germany, not a BMW or a Mercedes, but this Trabi, what was, used to be they were famous for making the worst car in the world.
I saw
and
them.
even for this car,
Yeah.
you had to wait such a long time. And in West Germany, you could go to every car dealer, and if you had the money, you could take it away, as in the United States, the same afternoon if you wanted. And not only this, only 16% in East Germany had telephone, landline. In West Germany, 99%, or in West Germany, almost everyone had his own toilet. And in East Germany, 27% had to share their toilet with other people. So a lot of facts. And this is not only with Germany. I give you another example that you find also in my book. And this is Vietnam. Vietnam is an interesting story because in the 90s, Vietnam was the poorest country in the world, poorer than all African countries. Of course, one reason was the war. It was not only the war with the United States. They were in war before with France, with Japan, with China, with almost everyone. So, and you have to know, there were 10 times more bombs and explosives on Vietnam than they had above Germany in the Second World War, 10 times more. But this was not only the war. When they won the war, what was not destroyed by the war was destroyed by this terrible planned economy, socialism. And in the result, they were the poorest country. But the Vietnamese people are very smart. I really admire them. They could blame, of course, Americans or Chinese or whoever for their problems, but they didn't do it. They really love Americans, especially Americans, even because the war plays not a role. They love Americans, and they blame themselves. And I think this is a good lesson also for every individual. You have to take responsibility not only for your success, but also for your failure or for your setback. And this is what they did. And they analyzed, we have the wrong economic system. And they started in the end of the 80s. They call it doi moi reforms. It means opening of the economy. They introduced private property and opened the economy with free trade agreements and had free market reforms. And the result is that the number of people living in poverty in Vietnam was reduced from 80% in the 90s to 3% today. Wow. From 80% to 3%. And of course, it's not pure capitalism. They call themselves socialists, but don't believe it. This is nonsense. I've been at 4 different universities. I had lectures there in Vietnam, and it's much easier to find a Marxist at one of the European or American universities than in Vietnam. For example, they invited me to a workshop at the Foreign Trade University in Hanoi. The topic was, how can we improve the image of rich people, of wealthy people? Could you imagine that I'm invited to a European or American university? How can we improve the image of wealthy people? Not ever. I speak at a lot of universities, but they never invited me. So it's one example. And then maybe let's compare Vietnam with another Asian country. This is Nepal. On my trip, my world trip, I was also in Nepal. You know, this is the country between China and India. And this is the second poorest country in Asia after Afghanistan. Very, very poor country. And for them, it's the country. Everything is forbidden. For example, they have a law. It's not allowed to make a profit of more than 20%. So you have to prove to the government how much was the cost to produce something, and then you can add 20%. And if you add more, you get problems, or you have to bribe. So it's crazy. And they have long lists what is forbidden to invest for foreign investors. In Vietnam, they love foreign investors. In Nepal, it's the opposite, and they have very high tariffs. Maybe Donald Trump would love Nepal because they have even higher tariffs than he suggested. They have more than 300%, for example, for BMW. It means a BMW that costs $80,000 in Europe, you have to pay $400,000 in Nepal. And of course, almost no one can buy it because they say it's luxury, and luxury is bad, and profit is bad. And they have a president, he's a Maoist, and they have a lot of parties there. They have more parties than in the United States. They have 120 parties, but 90 of them are Marxist, Leninist, or Maoist, or whatever. So, and they are very poor. They are so poor.
So you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned private property for one. You just talking about tariffs and things like that, which is a big debate in America right now. But if you were to step back and say, okay, here are some of the foundational issues from an economic standpoint that allow for prosperity. They don't guarantee it, but they don't impede prosperity. What would be some of the foundational ideas and principles that would enable a country to prosper?
I think first of all, it's capitalism. It's that, you know, I should explain what I mean with capitalism.
Yeah.
I mean, capitalism is democracy in the economy, that entrepreneurs decide what to produce. In the end, it's consumers' choice. We choose everything what is produced. For example, if you use Google, you make Sergey Brin and Larry Page rich. Or if you use Amazon, you make Jeff Bezos rich. If you buy a Tesla, you make Elon Musk. So it's our decision. And this is the opposite of socialism. In socialism, politicians decide what to produce. We have it now here in Europe, for example. They have a ban for the registration of cars with combustion engines. They start in 2035. It's forbidden to register new cars with combustion engines, or it should be all electric vehicle. I have nothing against electric vehicle, but I would say let's consumer decide. And this is, if you believe that politicians are the smartest people in the world, smarter than millions of entrepreneurs and millions of consumers, you should be pro-socialism, because this is what socialism means, that politicians decide we should only produce electric vehicles or something like this. And if you believe in people being smarter, there's millions of entrepreneurs and consumers than politicians, you should believe in free market. But it's also something else. It has, I think, if you believe in Christian values, it's also something else. It's also about values. It's about honesty. Some people think capitalism means to be bad to other people, even to bribe other people. No, it's not true. I think the foundation, of course, we have people in all countries, in all systems, also in capitalism, who bribe people, but they are punished in capitalism in socialism, if the state does this, you have no opportunity because you have to buy it from the state-owned company. But in capitalism, if someone makes such bad things, you can punish them if it's your decision whether you buy their products or not. And it's also another thing that sometimes are underestimated by economists. I'm not an economist. I'm a historian and sociologist. And so I believe that also values are very important. What do I mean with this? I mean, America is also based on the conviction that you are the master of your own destiny, that you are responsible for your life, and not about like victim mentality, what you find today very often. I'm a victim of capitalism, I'm a victim of racism, I'm a victim of sexism or gender, whatever. And, victim mentality makes people helpless. Yeah. And this is also, you can see it, I mentioned Vietnam, they could feel themselves as victims. We are victims of the United States, and please, now you have to give us development aid as the African countries do. Or we are the victims of colonialism or slavery, and now give us a lot of development aid. But this is not there's not a single example that a country became prosperous through development aid. But there are a lot of examples where a country came prosperous through capitalism. And this is something that I miss in the discussion. I think capitalism is especially important for poor people, for weak people, because the strong people can survive in almost every system, even in a dictatorship. For example, today in Venezuela, socialist Venezuela, there are some very rich people, and from the military, politicians, and with its corruptions, the strong, they survive almost everywhere. But for the poor people in the world, there's only one chance. It's capitalism. And this is the story, for example, that you see in countries like Poland or Vietnam that I mentioned.
Yeah, actually, I saw that in South Sudan recently, which is the poorest country in the world, according to some reports from 2024. Saw it in Burundi a couple of years ago, which is the second poorest. And it's interesting because we are there giving out aid, emergency food, drilling water wells, things like that. But when you talk to the people and ask them what they want, they want an education, and they want the opportunity to take care of themselves and take care of their family, and in many cases their village. And that sense of personal responsibility, the sense of just let me go to work and succeed, gives me a lot of hope, Whereas here in my country, I'm hearing more and more of the victim mentality that you talk about, and politicians talking about socialism, and it's rooted in Marxism, what Mark Levin calls American Marxism, I believe is what he calls it. But how do we communicate this? Because most people, man, when you start talking economics, their eyes just glaze over. How do we communicate to people the importance of understanding a free market economy, not just as a preference economically, but as a core value, one that is in line with biblical principles for Christians, but as something virtuous?
Yes, I think it's about freedom. It's the headline for me. The big headline is freedom, of course, with responsibility combined. It's, for example, freedom in the economy, it's capitalism, but also very important, freedom of speech, and this, the leftists, they are against economic freedom, and they are also against freedom of speech. So they are against both. And this is about, it's about freedom. And I think also, if you speak about Christianity, I think God made people different. He decided not to make everyone equal. It's the decision to have people equal. Some are intelligent, some are stupid, some are tall, some are small, some are beautiful, some are ugly, and people are different. And I think it's very wise not to make everyone equal, but to make people different, and we should accept it. And so if you want to make all people equal, I think it's also something against God's plan, because if he wanted to make everyone equal, he could do it this way.
Yeah.
But I think God was very smart not to make everyone equal, but to make people different.
Yeah, there's a huge difference between equal opportunity and equal outcome. And you really have to listen here, and at least in my country, for what people are saying when they talk about equality, because equality of opportunity, meaning that you don't hinder someone based on gender or skin color or whatever. But that's great. I think that's 100% right and biblical. But the idea of equal outcome, well, now you're talking about the government stepping in and deciding who can do what, so that whatever. How does this, do you think, relate to just the average person? Is it just a matter of the way they should vote, or is it a matter of education? How do we communicate this in a way that people see that it's important and relevant?
This is a very good question. I think the people who are pro-capitalism, they made a lot of mistakes. First, I know a lot of these libertarian people. In a way, I like them, but they talk too much about theory. I have here Mises quote and Milton Friedman quote and Hayek quote and everything interesting for me, but not for majority of the people. Right. It's too much theory. I do it a little bit different. I talk about history, and for example, this book now where I traveled to countries. I tell the stories, or I have here another book. This is The Power of Capitalism. It's about history. For example, here's a chapter, the first chapter, about China. Let me talk. And if people know these facts, yes, they think different, but they don't know it. Let me give you only one example. I had this lectures in 30 countries in the last 2 years, in Asia, in Latin America, in the United States, and in Europe. And I asked in every lecture, have you heard about the biggest socialist experiment in history? This is Mao Zedong's so-called Great Leap Forward. Mm-hmm. It happened from 1958 to 1962. I have here a chapter about what happened there. 45 million people died. 45 million died. And I asked everywhere. Sometimes I spoke only to 20 people, sometimes to 200, sometimes to 2,000. But wherever I've been, I asked my audience, have you heard at school or university about this biggest socialist experiment in history, Mao's Great Leap Forward, where 45 million people died? Or in every country, only very few people raised they haven't heard about it. And this is so, I believe, if people would know more about history, then but this is a problem in our school system, that we have so many left-leaning people there. And another thing, I think we should learn something from anti-capitalists and from the leftists. Mm-hmm. They are much better in marketing and in public relations than we are. Much better. I'll give you one example. In the last 200 years, since capitalism started, the number of people living in poverty worldwide decreased from 90% to 8.5%, from 90% to 8.5%. The same, and in the last 100 years, as a result of socialist experiments, more than 100 million people died. These are facts. But in the end, the image of capitalism is inhuman, and the image of socialism human. And to turn things like they did in George Orwell's 1984, yes, where they turned everything in the opposite.
Yep.
So they did it, yes, a system that is responsible for that so many people could escape poverty, to call it inhuman, and another system that improved the situation nowhere in the world, on the opposite, where a lot of people died, to call it as human, at least from the idea.
Yeah.
You have to be a marketing genius, and I think we should think about how we communicate. In my books, you find a lot of facts about capitalism. I have one book, for example, In Defense of Capitalism. This is full of facts. Right. But most of the people, they don't make their decision based on facts, but on emotion. This is in a way human. Yeah. And so I wrote an article some month ago in the Wall Street Journal. Sometimes I can write the articles in the Wall Street Journal, and it was about Ayn Rand. I'm not a big fan of her in a way, but because in a way it was a little bit like a cult. So, we can learn something from her. And the good thing is that we can learn from her. She wrote novels, and for example, if you compare Milton Friedman, I admire him very much, and our Hayek, these two economists pro-capitalism, they sold both together 3 million books, but Ayn Rand sold 37 million. So 10 times or 12 times more. Why? Because she wrote novels like Atlas Shrugged. It's more through emotion. So right. I did it now in Germany. I'm still looking for a publisher who can publish this in English. I have the English translation, but I don't have a publisher. This is my new book in German language. Nice. This is 2075, and it's When Beauty Became a Crime, and it's a novel. It's about there's a extreme movement, and they decided that women that are too beautiful, they call them privileged beauty, and we have to do something against them. So make them pay higher taxes or wage reduction, and in the end, even plastic surgery to make them, more average, their faces. It's a book against, this, and I think you would love the book, but because in the end, there's a movement against this crazy, and the movement has two parts. It's a libertarian part and a Christian part, because the Christians, they said, God made us this way, and men are not allowed to make this difference. So you would love the book, and maybe if someone listens and he has an idea for a publisher, I have the English translation, but I'm looking for a publisher, because this is the reason why I wrote this book, because I saw with my nonfiction books, it's only a limited audience. Yeah. Not everyone is interested in politics or economy. And even if I'm not in every way a fan of Ayn Rand, I think she was in a way anti-Christian, for example, what I'm not. Yes, but you can learn from almost everyone. And what you can learn from her, she wrote her novels. And this was the way why she was so successful. And so I thought, okay, I'd write also a novel, because this was your question, how can we reach out for more people? And I have a big goal, every new year I write down my goals. And my goal is I want to have it as a movie, and maybe as even a Hollywood or Netflix movie, because what I heard, that even in Hollywood, that we're all left-leaning, that even they start now to buy non-woke stuff. Right. And if someone listens to us who has a connection to Hollywood, please reach out for me. I only heard it. They are looking for non-woke good stuff. Yeah. Here is something. Yeah. What I can sell to you.
Okay. I have a suggestion for you after the program is over. I want to show people your current book. This is The Origins of Poverty and Wealth by Rainer Zitelmann, and you can go to the website origins-poverty-wealth.com to find the book and find more about the book. You can find the book anywhere you get books. But I have one question for you, Rainer, and that's because in my observations, having been to a lot of poor countries, Southeast Asia, Africa, even Eastern Europe back in the late 80s, early 90s, and Central America. The one thing, I mean, yes, natural disasters will exacerbate a problem, right? You have a flood, a famine, it creates an immediate crisis. But it just seems like wherever I go and there is abject poverty, there is you can trace, when you look at the history especially, human corruption somewhere along the line, whether it's in the form of war or just greed, oppression. I mean, in some cases, I guess you could go way back and argue colonization, which taking advantage of people. And which for a Christian like me, now that becomes much more than an economic thing, but it becomes important that people have, I believe, Christian values would lead people to treat people better and to put others in front of yourself. How big a factor is corruption, do you believe, in the creation of poverty?
It's a big factor. You see it everywhere. It's in Africa, it's in South America, it's in Eastern Europe. There's an index from Transparency International. You have corruption perception index every year. And the interesting thing is, if you compare the Transparency International corruption perception index with the index of economic freedom from the Heritage Foundation, you see that the countries that are most economically free, that they have less corruption. And it's very simple to understand it. The more regulations you have, the bigger the role of the government, the more reasons for corruption. Mm-hmm. If you have to ask so many, government officials to, for example, found your own new company or so, they can tell you, okay, it can take 2 or 3 years, but if you give me some cash, I can do it for you even in 2 or 3 weeks. Yep. But if you don't have to ask someone, and I have one example in my book, it's about Georgia, not Georgia in the United States, but the East European country. And they were very corrupt, and then they got rid of a lot of regulation. And this was the main reason that corruption was reduced. It's not the only reason, but the more regulation you have and the stronger the role of the government, the more reasons you have for corruption.
Yep.
And corruption is a big problem. And I admire you that you've been in so many countries, so you're well educated. I think this is a problem. I heard, I don't know whether it's true, that 70% of people in the United States never were out of the country, or even don't have passport. I don't know whether it's true, but so you've been in, and I think it educates you when you saw so many countries, and you can compare. I know not everyone had the opportunity, maybe not the time, not the money, or whatever. And so this is the reason why I wrote this book to give a little bit impressions from different countries.
Right. And I think most Americans have probably been somewhere, but it's maybe Canada, maybe the Caribbean, a place where you go vacation. Even the ones that go to Mexico go to the resorts and don't see the interior of the country where there is great poverty. But you don't have to get out and travel to see it. I've been fortunate enough to see it. You guys watching, you can learn from someone like Rainer Zitelmann just by reading the history and the why, and understanding something just as simple as what he just said, which is the more government control, and I've seen this all over the world, the more you breed corruption. And when you start having corruption, it inevitably leads to poverty in the people. And so this is, to me, this is actually very much tied in with the gospel, in the sense that the gospel instills a sense of what we call the fruit of the Spirit, sense of virtues. And without those virtues, the human bent towards evil manifests, and when the economic system leans that way, it really enables it. So anyway, don't bypass this. Pick up some of Rainer's books. You can go watch the film. I think the film on East Germany, West Germany is a brilliant example of the difference in the economic system and why we need to stand up as Christians in a political situation and say, no, we're not supporting you. We're opposing you politically because we don't want to give you power because we know it will hurt people. That's the core. Last word to you, Rainer Zitelmann. I appreciate your insight and your time today. What do you want to leave people with?
Let me say something political for the United States as I see it here. I think there's a problem today that it's in a way a divided country as I see it. I've been often in the United States, especially with some really Trump believers, like they worship him like a god, and some Trump haters who really hate him like the devil. And I had also differentiated position. For example, I think some things are good that he did. For example, what he did with Elon Musk now to cut down this US aid that helps no one at this Dodge industry. So some other things, I think it's crazy, like this, like with his tariffs and so on. I would differentiate it. Not everyone has to share it, yes, but I say something it's good and some things it's bad. And this is what I miss. And I hope, and I would encourage everyone, try to think differentiated, and then it's sometimes easier to come together with other people. If you say only black and white, I have it sometimes when you know this hardcore Trump supporters, and if I say only a little bit critical, they really upset, because for them it's like you can't say anything negative. And for the others, the Trump haters, if I say something positive, so what? And I would encourage people in the United States, don't be this way. Build your own opinion. It's Donald Trump is not God, and Donald Trump is not devil. Yes, it's not. So this is, I don't know how you see it, but this is only the way I see it.
I agree with you. And as someone who voted for Trump, I actually would disagree even with you on the idea of the U.S. aid, in that cutting it off entirely creates some, children will die, unfortunately, because of the way the system's set up. Get rid of the corruption, get rid of the waste. Absolutely. But I was just, at the UN compound and again in South Sudan not too long ago, and got a real sense of how actually what we do, they actually support us. And cutting off the U.S. aid, it's a different discussion, very nuanced. And I'm like you,
I agree. I think if there's a natural disaster or people, starvation, of course, one should help. Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Even you should do more, in my opinion. But the idea of development aid, that you can, with money, make a country prosperous. This is not, you have to distinguish. Sometimes if they talk about development aid, they mean different things.
You're right.
And if you mean helping people, if there's a starvation or natural disaster in this situation, I'm absolutely even do more.
Okay.
But if you think you can help the development of a country, or like some Americans thought you can export democracy, for example, make Iraq or Afghanistan democratic countries. It failed. It's not possible, because
it's not
democracy and capitalism is a grassroots movement. You can't do it top down. It's more bottom up. It comes from the people. So you're right. I agree. Another good example, you have to differentiate. It's not all bad. It's not all good.
Not all bad. You're right.
Go more in detail. You're right.
To your point, and if you get rid of the waste, you actually could do more emergency relief. When I was in Bor, South Sudan, I was listening to local radio, and they were talking about the multi-million-dollar initiative to fight climate change in South Sudan. And I'm listening to the radio going, your people are starving to death. What are you spending millions? And it's U.S. aid money primarily, or European aid money in some cases. But it's crazy.
They spent money for transgender opera with U.S. aid. Have you heard about these things? How should this help people to have this transgender opera, or maybe transgender comic or whatever? So
it's crazy. Yeah, and if you go into a village out in the middle of nowhere in most of these countries and say, "Can a man become a woman?" they laugh at you, because it doesn't make sense.
This is only an idea, maybe popular in only some parts of the United States. No, maybe I see you again. I will go. I'm in the United States. Do you know Freedom Fest? I will come to Freedom Fest. It's in June. It's in Palm Springs. There are a lot of libertarian and conservative people. It's organized by economist Mark Skousen. You can Google it. Freedom Fest. It's Palm Springs this time. Last year it was in Las Vegas, but I don't forget it. It was 120 Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
120. So I love it when it's hot, but I love 100 is okay, but 120 I'm out. But this time it's in Palm Springs. I will be there. Maybe some go there. It's great. You meet there 2,000 or 3,000 people. For example, my friend Steve Forbes is always there. Yes,
okay.
he will take a part there, and you find a lot of good people. Also Christian people. You find a lot there. Maybe see you there at Freedom Fest.
Perhaps, but Vegas, it's a dry heat, so you're not wet when you catch on fire out there. So anyway, all right, I'm gonna let you guys go watching out there. I know some of this makes your head spin a little bit, but it's actually very important, and it is tied into not just money, but core beliefs, core values, and even Christianity. Read your Bible. You'll pick up on some of that. Appreciate you guys sticking this long with it. And again, you can pick up Rainer Zitelmann's book, check out his films. If you'll go to his website, if you go to actually to origins-poverty-wealth.com, it looks like this. You'll find out more about him. But let's dig into the nuance. Let's be intelligent, and let's keep helping people. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time here on Life Today Live.